When Richard passed away, the world stopped making sense for Linda. The house they'd shared for over 30 years suddenly felt like a stranger's place. Every photo on the wall, every mug on the counter, every little sound reminded her that he was gone. The laughter that once filled the air was replaced by quiet and empty kind of silence that followed her everywhere she went. Linda had always imagined growing old with Richard. They'd promised each other simple things: coffee every morning, long walks by the lake, and watching their grandkids play one day. But cancer had stolen that dream too soon. The day she buried him, the sky was gray, and so was her heart. People came, hugged her, said things like he's in a better place. But when the last car drove away, it was just her, the empty house, and the ache that never seemed to fade. Her son, Michael, had been her only light during those dark months. At 28, he was calm, thoughtful, and protective. He looked so much like his father that sometimes it hurt to look at him. He'd been living in Boston working as an architect. But after Richard's death, he decided to stay with his mother for a while. "You shouldn't be alone, Mom," he'd said. Linda had wanted to argue, but she couldn't. The truth was, she didn't want to be alone either. The first few weeks after the funeral, Linda went through the motions, making breakfast she barely ate, watering plants she didn't care for, and pretending to watch television while her mind drifted somewhere else. Michael tried his best to bring some life back into the house. He cooked, cleaned, and even fixed the squeaky back door Richard used to complain about. But grief hung over everything like a heavy curtain. One evening, as rain tapped softly on the windows, Michael walked into the living room with 2 cups of tea. He sat beside his mother and handed her one. "You know, Dad always said your art could make anyone feel something," he said gently. Linda blinked, confused. "My art?" "Your paintings," he replied. "You used to paint every week before." Before Dad got sick, Sta looked toward the old bookshelf where a few of her framed paintings leaned against the wall. Landscapes, mostly golden fields, quiet lakes, and faces she'd once loved to capture. "That was a long time ago, Michael," she murmured. "I don't think I could paint again." "Not now." Michael leaned forward, his voice soft but steady. "Maybe that's exactly what you need to do. Paint again. For yourself. For Dad." The suggestion stayed with her long after he went to bed. That night, Linda lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain. She thought of Richard, how he used to tease her about getting paint on her clothes, how he always said her paintings felt alive. She remembered the way he'd look at her, proud and warm. The memory brought tears to her eyes, but also something else's small flicker of warmth that hadn't been there in months. The next morning, she found herself in the attic where her old art supplies were stored. Dust-coated everything: boxes, brushes, even the wooden easel Richard had bought her on their 10th anniversary. Linda sat on the floor and ran her fingers over the paint tubes. Hard and dry now, but still familiar. For the first time since his death, she felt something other than sadness. She felt possibility. That evening, Michael came home to find his mother at the kitchen table with a blank canvas in front of her. A few paintbrushes lay beside it, and small jars of color were scattered around. She looked up when she heard him and smiled softly. "I thought I'd try again," she said. Michael smiled back, relief and pride in his eyes. "I'm glad, Mom. Really glad." The first strokes were hesitant, shaky even. But once she started, her hands remembered what her heart had forgotten. Hours passed, and Linda lost herself in color and light. When she finally looked up, it was almost midnight. On the canvas was the lake she and Richard had visited every summer, blue.com, and endless. She touched the edge of the painting and whispered, "For you, Richard." Over the next week, painting became her therapy. Every morning, she'd sit near the big window in the living room and paint until the sunlight faded. Sometimes she painted landscapes, sometimes faces she remembered. Michael would quietly watch her in the evenings, never interrupting, just smiling. The more she painted, the more alive she felt. But there was one night when something shifted, something quiet but powerful. She was painting a portrait of Richard from an old photo when she noticed Michael standing behind her. "You really captured him," he said softly. "That look in his eyes, it's just like I remember." Linda turned, smiling faintly. It's strange. When I paint, it's like he's here with me again. Michael looked at her for a moment, then said maybe that's his way of staying close. Their eyes met, and for a fleeting second, Linda felt something stir in her heart, not romance, but a deep emotional connection. A shared grief that bound them together in ways words couldn't explain. Michael wasn't just her son. He was a reflection of the man she had loved all her life. The days that followed were gentler. Michael would bring her morning coffee, they'd share stories about Richard, and sometimes they'd laugh free, a laughter that surprised them both. The heaviness in the house began to lift. One evening, Michael found an old photo album and brought it to the living room. They sat together on the couch, flipping through pictures, weeding photos, vacations, birthdays. Linda smiled at a picture of Richard holding baby Michael. "He was so proud of you," she whispered. Michael leaned closer. "You both gave me everything, Mom." There was a silence then, not awkward, but full of understanding. They both knew they were healing, slowly but surely. That night, before going to bed, Michael paused at her door. "Mom," he said softly, "I think Dad would be proud of you too." She smiled weakly, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, sweetheart." When he left, Linda sat alone for a while, thinking about her life, the love she'd lost, the son she'd raised, and the strange comfort of rediscovering herself. She realized something important. Richard might be gone, but love wasn't. It lived in memories, in kindness, in the quiet moments she now shared with Michael. The next morning, she woke up early and decided to start a new painting, something different. Not of the past, but of the future. She painted a sunrise over the mountains, bold and bright, full of hope. For the first time, she smiled without guilt. Later that day, when Michael saw the painting, he said, "It's beautiful, Mom. It feels new." Linda nodded. "That's what it's supposed to be." That evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Michael turned to her with an expression she hadn't seen before, thoughtful, almost hesitant. "Mom," he said carefully, "there's something I've been meaning to tell you." She looked at him curiously. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "I think it's time we both moved on. You've been so strong, and I want you to be happy again. I have an idea, something that might help." Linda frowned slightly, unsure what he meant. "What kind of idea?" Michael smiled faintly. "Let's make this house feel alive again. Let's change things. Maybe start something new together." Linda didn't fully understand, but something about his tone made her heart skip. He sounded determined, hopeful. "All right," she said softly. "Tell me what you have in mind." Michael looked at her, eyes shining with quiet excitement. "You'll see tomorrow. Just trust me, okay?" Linda hesitated but nodded. "Okay." That night, as she got ready for bed, she felt an odd mix of curiosity and nervousness. What could Michael be planning? He hadn't looked that alive in months. She smiled faintly before turning off the light, unaware that tomorrow would bring a change she could never have imagined. The next morning, sunlight poured into the living room, painting golden streaks across the floorboards. Linda yawned and rubbed her eyes, still feeling the lingering ache of yesterday's late-night reflections. When she came downstairs, she noticed Michael moving furniture around. He had cleared the old living room entirely, stacking the sofas against the walls and pushing aside the coffee table. "Michael, what are you doing?" she asked, raising an eyebrow, half amused, half curious. He looked at her, eyes sparkling with a mix of mischief and determination. "I thought we could make the space more inspiring," he said. "We need somewhere you can paint freely. Somewhere you can really express yourself without worrying about the house." Linda felt a strange warmth in her chest. Her son, always thoughtful and practical, was thinking about her happiness in ways she hadn't expected. "All right," she said, walking over to watch him rearrange things. "Show me what you have in mind." Michael moved a tall lamp into the corner and pulled a small table closer to the window. "This will be your new workspace," he explained. "You'll have sunlight in the morning and peace in the evening. And I've cleared some space for your canvases. You can leave your work here, Come back anytime and it'll still feel fresh. Linda felt her heart swell. Michael, this is wonderful. Thank you. She paused, looking at him closely. You've been so thoughtful. He shrugged lightly, but there was a serious glint in his eyes. I want you to be happy, Mom. I want you to feel alive again. I know Dad is gone and I can't bring him back. But maybe I can help you find something new. Linda smiled faintly, feeling tears prick her eyes. She hadn't realized how much she needed someone to remind her that life could continue after grief. She nodded. I trust you. Over the next few days, Linda settled into her new routine. She painted every morning, letting her emotions flow onto the canvas. Michael would often bring her coffee and sometimes sit nearby, sketching quietly in a notebook. At first, Linda was curious about what he was drawing, but she didn't ask. Instead, she watched him occasionally, noticing how focused and passionate he looked. There was something calming in seeing him so dedicated to his craft. One afternoon, while working on a new painting, serene lakeside scene, Linda noticed Michael hovering near the window. He was silent, observing, but his expression had changed. There was a certain hesitation in his movements, something she hadn't seen before. Michael, she asked, pausing her brush. Is everything okay? He nodded quickly. Yes, Mom. Just thinking. Linda didn't press further. Sometimes, after losing someone close, people needed time to process their own thoughts. She returned to her painting, though a small flicker of curiosity lingered. The next day, Michael approached her with an idea. Mom, I was thinking, since you've been painting so beautifully, maybe we could do a project together. Something special. Linda looked at him, slightly surprised. A project. What kind of project? I was thinking, he hesitated briefly, maybe you could let me photograph some of your work. Not just the finished pieces, but also the process. Watching you create. It's like art itself, and I'd love to capture that. Linda blinked, unsure what to say. She hadn't thought about letting anyone see her painting process. It was intimate, personal, almost like sharing her soul. But then she saw the earnest look in Michael's eyes. You really want to do that? She asked softly. He nodded. Yes. Only if you're comfortable, Mom. I won't push you. Linda considered it. There was something intriguing about the idea, about seeing herself through someone else's eyes. All right, she said slowly. We can try it. The first session was quiet. Michael set up his camera and positioned Linda near the window where the sunlight fell just right. She felt slightly awkward at first, but Michael's calm encouragement made her relax. He spoke gently, directing her movements, making suggestions about angles and light, but never in a way that felt controlling. As the hours passed, Linda found herself forgetting the presence of the camera. She was absorbed in her painting, her brush moving freely across the canvas. Occasionally, Michael would click the shutter softly, capturing her in candid moments, concentration, contemplation, a fleeting smile. When they reviewed the photos later, Linda was astonished. Michael had captured something she didn't even know existed, the quiet strength in her expression, the dedication in her posture, the subtle warmth in her eyes. For the first time since Richard's passing, she saw herself as more than a grieving widow. She saw a woman capable of beauty, passion, and resilience. Over the following days, the project became a routine. Linda would paint, Michael would photograph, and together they would discuss the results. Their conversations were gentle and filled with admiration, not just for the art, but for each other's talents. There was an unspoken closeness that grew naturally, rooted in mutual respect and shared grief. One evening, after finishing a particularly vivid painting of a sunset over the mountains, Linda turned to Michael. I never imagined painting could feel this. Alive, she said softly. Michael smiled, leaning back in his chair. You've always had it in you, Mom. I just helped you see it again. Linda felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of gratitude and something she didn't yet understand. She realized that life had a way of offering new beginnings, even in the aftermath of loss. But not everything was simple. One afternoon, while reviewing some photos, Linda noticed one particular image that made her pause. It was a close-up of her face as she was painting, eyes closed, a faint smile playing on her lips. There was a vulnerability in the image, a rawness that she hadn't expected. "Michael," she said hesitantly, "this one. It's very personal." He nodded, looking thoughtful. "I know, Mom. That's why I think it's important. It shows your true self. Not just the surface, but the heart behind the art." Linda considered his words. She knew he was right. There was power in showing vulnerability, in allowing someone to see the depths of her emotions. Still, she felt a flutter of nervousness. This closeness with her son was something new, something delicate. As the days turned into weeks, the project continued to evolve. Linda's paintings grew bolder, her strokes more confident, her subjects more imaginative. Michael's photographs captured every moment. The focus, the emotion, the connection between brush and canvas. They were building something together, a legacy of creativity and trust. One rainy afternoon, as Linda painted a stormy seascape, Michael spoke quietly. "Mom, do you ever think about the future? About what comes next for you?" Linda paused, brush in hand. "I think about it every day," she admitted. "I don't know exactly what it will be, but I want to live, truly live again. Not just survive." Michael nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then let's do it together. Let's make this house, this art, this time, something we can be proud of. Something that shows life doesn't end with loss. It continues in new ways." Linda smiled, feeling a surge of hope. Yes, together. That night, after Michael had gone to bed, Linda sat by the window and looked at her latest painting. The colors were vibrant, the brushstrokes bold, and for the first time, she felt truly alive. She realized that grief didn't have to define her. It could inspire her, guide her, and even lead to unexpected joy. And as she drifted off to sleep, she thought about the strange, beautiful bond she shared with Michael, a connection built on loss, love, and the quiet hope of new beginnings. The following morning, the sunlight spilled through the curtains in soft golden streams. And Linda woke with a sense of anticipation she couldn't explain. Michael was already in the living room, arranging his camera gear as if preparing for something important. "Good morning." "Mom," he said quietly, a faint nervousness in his tone. Linda smiled, feeling a flutter of curiosity. "Morning, you look serious today." He glanced up at her, eyes earnest. "I wanted to show you something new, something that goes beyond just photographing your work." Linda tilted her head. "Beyond?" Michael nodded, a hint of excitement and caution mingling in his expression. "I want to capture you, Mom. Not just your paintings, not just the process, but the emotions behind everything you do. I think it could be powerful, beautiful." Linda paused, considering his words. Her heart raced. She had grown used to their collaboration, the gentle photography sessions, the shared laughter, the quiet admiration. But this felt like stepping into uncharted territory. I'm not sure," she said softly. "It sounds very personal." Michael smiled reassuringly. "It is, but I promise only what you're comfortable with. You can stop anytime. I just want to show the strength and beauty I see in you. Not for anyone else, just for us to understand each other better." Linda took a deep breath. There was something about his sincerity, his careful respect for her feelings that gave her courage. "All right," she said finally, "let's try it." As they began, Linda felt the familiar tension of vulnerability. Michael guided her gently, suggesting subtle poses that emphasized her focus and passion rather than anything superficial. He adjusted the light, capturing the soft curves of her hands as they held brushes, the tilt of her head as she studied the canvas. The quiet strength in her posture. Time seemed to stretch. Linda painted and paused, feeling more alive with each stroke. Michael's camera clicked softly in the background, capturing fleeting moments that spoke more about her resilience than her appearance. At one point, she noticed Michael watching her intently, not just photographing, but observing, studying the subtle emotions that flickered across her face. There was admiration there, yes, but also something deeper. a recognition of her inner strength, her journey through grief, and the way she had learned to embrace life again. "Michael," she whispered, almost afraid to break the spell. "I feel exposed." He shook his head gently. "No, Mom, you're not exposed. You're inspiring. You're living, and that's what I want to capture. The courage it takes to continue to love, to create its breathtaking." Linda felt a wave of warmth, a mixture of gratitude, pride, and an unfamiliar closeness. She realized that their bond had grown into something extraordinary. It was not just mother and son, it was a partnership of hearts, a shared journey through loss and rebirth. They spent hours this way, until the afternoon sun began to wane, casting longer shadows across the floor. Linda paused, stepping back from her canvas, and Michael lowered the camera. "You did wonderfully," he said softly. "Every photo tells a story. Every moment shows how strong and beautiful you are." Linda's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I don't know what to say. I've never seen myself like this before. Not since Richard. Not ever." Michael walked over and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Then let these photos remind you that life continues, that you can be happy again, that you are enough, more than enough." For a long moment, Linda just let herself breathe, feeling the comfort of his words and the bond they had created. It was a connection that went beyond grief, beyond art, into something profoundly human, a mutual respect, admiration, and trust. As evening approached, they decided to review the day's photos. Sitting together on the couch, Michael scrolled through the images, occasionally stopping to point out a subtle expression or a delicate gesture. Linda felt a mixture of pride and wonder. She had never thought of herself as remarkable, but through Michael's lens, she saw a reflection of resilience and beauty she had almost forgotten. "Mom," Michael said finally, turning to her with a thoughtful expression, "do you realize what this project is? It's not just about painting or photography. It's about seeing each other, really seeing each other. About trust, about love, about moving forward." Linda nodded, her heart swelling. "I think I'm beginning to understand. It's more than I imagined. It's life itself." The days turned into weeks, and their collaboration became more than a project. It became a ritual, a source of comfort and inspiration. Linda painted with renewed passion, her work reflecting a depth of emotion she hadn't explored before. Michael's photography captured every nuance, the flicker of concentration, the quiet joy, the subtle melancholy, the sparks of hope. One quiet evening, as the sky blushed pink and orange, Linda paused in her work and looked at Michael. "I never imagined that losing Dad, that grief, could lead to something like this. Something beautiful." Michael smiled, reaching out to place a reassuring hand on hers. "Life has a way of surprising us, Mom. Sometimes the hardest moments lead to the most meaningful ones, and I wanted to help you see that." Linda felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were tears of gratitude, of hope, of newfound strength. She realized that she had been given a second chance not to replace the past, but to build something new, something profound, with someone who understood her heart. As night fell, they packed up the equipment and shared a quiet dinner, talking about the art, the photos, and the subtle shifts in their emotions. Linda felt lighter than she had in months. She had been lost in grief, but now she was finding herself again, discovering a joy that had been dormant and a bond that was unbreakable. Days later, Michael suggested something that took Linda by surprise. "Mom, I've been thinking. These photos, these paintings, maybe we could have a small exhibition, just for friends or even just the two of us. It could celebrate your journey, our collaboration, and the life you're rediscovering." Linda felt a thrill of excitement and nervousness. "An exhibition for our art." "Yes," he said earnestly. "It's about showing the beauty in perseverance, in connection, in creativity. It's about life continuing even after loss." Linda considered it. She realized that this was more than just an exhibition, it was a statement, a celebration, a recognition of their bond and her resilience. "All right," she said finally, a small smile lighting her face. Let's do it together. The preparation was a whirlwind of activity. Linda painted with intensity, refining her favorite pieces, while Michael carefully selected and edited the photographs that best captured her emotions. They worked side by side, laughing, encouraging, sometimes falling silent in deep reflection. The night of the exhibition arrived. The living room was transformed, filled with vibrant canvases and beautifully framed photographs. Friends and neighbors arrived, marveling at the artistry and the emotion behind each piece. Linda felt a quiet pride, but more than that, she felt gratitude for Michael the boy who had guided her back to herself, who had helped her rediscover life, joy, and hope. When the exhibition ended, Linda and Michael stood together, surveying the room. "Mom," Michael said softly, "you did it. You brought your pain, your hope, your love, and made something lasting, something beautiful." Linda smiled, feeling a depth of emotion she couldn't put into words. "We did it," she corrected him gently. "Together." As they stood there, surrounded by the colors of her art and the light captured in his photos, Linda realized that life after loss was not about forgetting the past. It was about embracing the present, cherishing connections, and daring to find joy again. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly whole. And as Michael stood beside her, she understood that some bonds built on trust, creativity, and love could guide a person through grief into a future filled with possibility.